I am relatively new to the real estate owners market, so there's a story of a lot of debt growing up and coming from a family of divorced parents where I lived with an incredible mother who had a penchant for spending, but my dad, had is a great saver. But when my parents split up at the age of 10, obviously I was more exposed to the example of spending rather than saving.
You're listening to Property Investor Tales, stories from the front yard. Here's your host, Tabitha Bright.
Hello and welcome to Property Investor Tales, stories from the front yard, where I get to speak to property investors from around Australia about their investing journey. My name's Tabitha Bright and I'm the head of coaching here at Positive Real Estate, where we help people build wealth through property. With over 8,000 clients across Australia and New Zealand, there are some incredible stories to tell, which hopefully make your investing journey that little bit easier and will inspire you along the way. So my guest today is Marcus Pearce, and we discuss living two doors down from your in-laws, changing our money habits from spender to saver, and Marcus's fascinating research as I can say, ex-journalist into longevity and why this is so important to us as investors. Enjoy this conversation with Marcus. Hey everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. We're super lucky today to have the fabulous Marcus Pearce with us. So Marcus, I think you're probably going to be better at doing your own intro. So I'm going to be a lazy podcaster and hand over to you with your wealth of experience. Tell us who you are, a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background.
Oh, thanks for having me, Tab. There's a few different ways we can go about this because I am relatively new to the real estate owners market. So there's a story of a lot of debt growing up and coming from a family of divorced parents where I lived with an incredible mother who had a penchant for spending, but my dad, is a great saver. But when my parents split up at the age of 10, obviously I was more exposed to the example of spending rather than saving. So there's that part of history. As we were just saying earlier, I'm a sports journalist in the old days from, I finished school in 99, so up until 2006. The Melbourne Commonwealth Games was probably my last big event in the mainstream media. And then married my beautiful wife, who's a chiropractor by profession, but she's now retired. We've got 400 kids, 4 kids in reality, but sometimes feels like 400. And then so that was a transition from what I call, sports media to personal growth, health and wellness media. And ever since about 2012, 13, I've been somewhat obsessed with longevity and quality of life and what does it take to live a great long life, and host a podcast, 100 Not Out, and wrote a book on a lot of my findings called Your Exceptional Life. And, like to travel the world when we're allowed to investigate some of the more long-lived cultures and how can we translate their lessons to us here in Australia. Because as I tell people, you don't have to live in Sardinia or in Ikaria or Okinawa to live a great long life. We already have longevity here in Australia. So plenty to talk about, but happy to go in any direction you like.
Oh, well, no, it was just good to have that summary because I know you've studied, what are they called, blue zones, where you have groups of people or cultures that have extraordinarily long life and extraordinary quality of life. And that's been a big passion of yours. And you've written your book, Your Exceptional Life, like you were just saying before, you've authored that. And I just wanted to make sure people understood that that has been your passion and that you often support a lot of mentoring clients and positive real estate clients. I'm bringing some of that to the table because it's something that we have to think about if we're going to, like we were talking about at mentoring last night, if we're going to put all this energy and time and effort and resources into having the financial ability to have quality of life, we've got to make sure we're healthy, we've got good support networks, family, friends, passions, to then also ensure that we're able to enjoy the quality of life at the time that financially we can. And that's been a big thing that we've tapped into for you. So I wanted to make sure we did cover that off today. But take me back to the beginning first and foremost. Tell me a little bit about your background, because often we obviously start life with whatever skills and tools our parents can give us, and then it's up to us to take those and turn them into whatever else we're able to, and to research and improve whatever we can. So tell me about where you started, what it taught you, and where you ended up.
Well, I think what I think about, more and more these days, particularly having only entered the market, real estate market in 2020,
Yep.
is just how much of an imprint our childhood has on our financial future. And I don't say this from a perspective of excuses. I actually say it from a perspective of a lot of hard work done over the course of, I'm 40 years of age, and I think, from the age of 20, I think I read Think and Grow Rich, or Rich, I think I read Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was 19 or 20. And at the very end of Rich Dad Poor Dad, Kiyosaki thanks Napoleon Hill and his book Think and Grow Rich. And I'm one of those people that if, a book recommends a book, it takes you on this beautiful, like a bibliography is a cracking way to learn about new books. So when Kiyosaki, thanked Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich, I attempted to read Think and Grow Rich, and like many people that have probably read Think and Grow Rich, it does take 3 or 4 or 5 goes to actually finish that book. But I say that because I've always been determined to be financially healthy from a very young age, but I have found it incredibly difficult over those 2 decades to do it well. I was telling you off air earlier, just certain, I can remember my first credit card and my first purchase. I remember I bought a pair of Nike runners at Doncaster Shopping Town. I think they were $199. I still remember it was like Thursday night shopping. And I was a mixture of proud and felt like I'd got away with something. That whole thing of like, and this is the thing of like, I'd grown up in a house where it was like credit cards were great. Being able to pay it off, in the future was a really good thing. And it's really interesting to me now that that is a perception that many people still to this day would think is a wonderful thing. Harvey Norman cards and buying your MacBook on, a payment plan and all of these things, it takes a lot of time to undo. My Sarah and I were $55,000 in credit card debt after we got married, and we set up a business, and it was very much on a you only live once basis. Like, babe, we're only having one wedding, so let's do the wedding well. We're only going on one honeymoon, so let's do the honeymoon well. You're only going to have one wedding dress, so, buy a good one. Whatever it is, I'm a great justifier of spending. Like, still to this day, I can justify any expense. I would always prioritize experiences over assets. So I can tell you right now, like in 2018, Sarah and I took the kids to Europe on a 6-week trip. It cost between $40,000 and $50,000. I could have very easily put that into the real estate investment account, but literally only 4 years ago, I was prioritizing that spend on an experience, and I don't have regrets about it, and I don't think it was a bad decision. What I do think is that it's a reflection of my upbringing, and it's a difficult imprint to change is not the word I'm looking for, because it's not something that I necessarily want to change, but it's a difficult imprint to acknowledge, particularly when you're looking to make changes. So I observed that after reading and I know I'm waffling on here a bit, but I
No, you're not.
remember it like it was yesterday. It was in the Christmas New Year period of 2019 going into 2020, when we actually didn't know about COVID. And I was reading for the third or fourth or fifth time Richest Man in Babylon.
Ah, yes.
Um, one of those
Great book,
books,
by the way.
great book, and it's so easy to read. Like you can knock it over in a night or two sitting on the couch.
Yeah,
And I
good for
still
kids too.
remember it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just a great
Teenagers.
book.
Yep.
Um, and it's probably a book that I've probably had since I was 20 or 21, right? And there was a section in there, literally a line called "Control." Like the secret to riches is to control thy expenses. And I know it sounds inanely simple. And I know we've heard so many times before, spend less than you earn and invest
Yeah.
the difference. And
Yeah.
I don't know what it was, but it's so cliche to go that like, um, when you hear it for the X amount of time, like you'll really get it. But it was a moment where I was like, I've really got to stop justifying spending more than I earn in the spirit of experiences, in the spirit of I'll earn that money back, in the spirit of, I'll pay it with the future. Like, and I'm not sure it was because I was having more kids. Maybe this was only a few months after we'd had our fourth child. So
Mm,
maybe it was like a maturity of like, Marcus, stop living in tomorrow, like stop living in tomorrow's income. But over that Christmas 2019 period, I was like, okay, in 2020, hand on heart,
yep.
I will put 20% of my income to debt demolition.
Yep.
I will put 10% of my income to investing for the future,
Yep.
even if I don't know what it is that I'm investing in. And
Yep.
I will master the art of living off that 70%, and I will control thy expenses. And I burnt it in my brain. And I don't know if this is woo woo or just, give and you shall receive or whatever.
Yep.
But after I had decided to give that to myself and the family, and COVID hit and all this wild stuff happened. Literally 6 months later, we were putting an offer down on the very plot of land that I'm standing on now,
That's
which is two
awesome.
doors down from Sarah's mum and dad, who we absolutely love. And you can imagine four children having their nana and pa just a hop, skip, and a jump away. And any parent with young children, imagine having parental help, two doors away. And I feel like it was the universe going, show me that you're ready and I can open some doors for you. But it
Yeah.
wasn't until I valued saving, like genuinely valued saving,
Yeah.
that opportunity opened. So I have
Open.
no idea what your question was, and I've got no idea if I answered it, but
No, you
that's what
have.
came.
You're perfect, but I am going to stop you right there because I want to drill down on something, because you appealed to me with how you frame things, because you're not woo woo, as you called it, for the sake of being woo woo. Now, across my travels and over, if I can use the word journey, which I really hate, over the
Adventure. It's
over
your
the
adventure. Yeah,
over
yeah,
my adventures,
yeah.
um, I've met people of all walks of life, all beliefs, and I've enjoyed spending time with people that are quite woo woo and have beliefs about what's the word? The secret and all of that. And I do think
Well,
there
look
is.
at I'm not esoteric. There are many esoteric people out there
Thank
that
you.
it's a bit
Thank
vague. Yeah.
you. Yes, you can be quite practical. And I think the pendulum for me has swung both ways. I've been quite skeptical over my life. I've gone a bit woo woo, and I've probably swung back to about the middle, where I like to think of myself as pragmatic, but open to stuff. And so when you say you don't know if this is woo woo or not, I'll get to my point now. There is something about goal setting, though. There is something about having an intention. There must be a science behind it. I haven't looked into it. I
Yeah.
know there's all those documentaries, and there's The Secret, and there's
Yeah.
people, all sorts of people looking into it. But there is something very tangible about
Yeah.
having a goal and writing down an intention. give me your thoughts on that in 2 seconds.
Yeah, so I agree 4 trillion%. If
Mhm.
I could show you under my stand-up desk here, annual goals, monthly goals.
Ah,
I'll freak you out a bit though now. I
oh,
actually have changed setting my goals from the sun, which is like calendar months, to the moon. So I
oh,
now set my goals in moon cycles, rather than sun cycles,
tell me
because
why.
there's a whole different set of wisdom around when there's new moons, you've got big ideas, you start things and all the rest of it. When you got waning moons, you're in declutter and clean up, and you're Marie Kondo, and you're like getting everything clean and finishing up. I just found that with setting my goals by just the calendar year, which is I still do a calendar year, but I'll break it up into more moon cycles. I
Mm.
found I would force things more because of a date rather than a certain sense of flow at the time. But that's a conversation for another day. I love setting goals. I set them religiously. If I
Yeah,
don't, I feel like I get swept up in someone else's script, someone else's demands, or someone else's goals.
someone else's.
And so I feel for me like that setting goals allows me to say yes to me and no to others when appropriate. Otherwise, I feel like it would be reversed, and I'd say yes to others and no to me when I would probably want it to be the other way around.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Moon cycles.
Yeah, I got you there, didn't I?
I was still,
Got you
yeah,
there.
you got right in my head because there's a couple of the coaches that I work with that are part of Positive Real Estate. Um, if we have to have conversations that require some skill and we're going to debate something, we have an agreement that we don't talk on a full moon. And simply because every time it goes sideways, it's
Never
just,
run an event on a full moon. Never have big conversations on a full moon. They're completely impractical, illogical. No,
oh my Lord.
have the
Yep.
good ones on a new moon and get projects and cases finished on
Oh,
a waning moon. People love it. Yeah, it's a weird thing. I'm not going to be attempt to even explain it. But you look at people, and talk to Sam Saggers and his neighbours with the leaf blowers. They're all out at waning moons, keeping their houses clean, their garden tidy, and it's yeah. But anyway, we're going
okay,
off. Sorry, I'm
glass
taking
of
the
wine that
interview
conversation's for.
way off course. Yeah.
We are. So tell me about your property journey. Where did you end up with your home? Because there's some stories
Yeah.
in that with in-laws and all sorts.
Absolutely. So it was the Queen's birthday public holiday of 2020. I'd been consulting to Positive in a content role for about 1 month, I think. And I don't know how it came about, but I remember I was having a phone conversation with Jason Witten, and he said to me, if you don't go and find a block, at least like literally pull over now, turn left, go into Mullum, and find a block of land. It was when the home builder grant had been announced.
Yes, yes, yes,
Find a
yes.
block of land that is registered and ready to build and get yourself into the game. And he'd probably had that conversation with me 10 times earlier in my life. But
Huh.
there was something that made me pull over, call the agent, who it was a public holiday, but who actually texted me back going, I can take you around tomorrow. Um, and then I met with him and looked at the block. It was a very high grade. He would have had beautiful views, but would have spent a bomb before they'd even put a nail into
Right. Yeah.
piece of timber, and then said, "Look, the developer actually buys himself, 2 blocks in each stage of the development, and sells them off when he opens up a new stage. So there is a block that isn't officially for sale, but I know he's prepared to sell it.
Ah.
So literally took me to where I'm standing right now." Um, Nowhere near the gradient, a beautiful view of Mount Chincogan in Mullumbimby, a piece of land that looks out onto a nature reserve. So we've got neighbours to the left and right, but everything in our backyard just looks onto nature. Just got a
Nature.
completely green Green View.
Ah,
And he said I could probably get him down to a good price for you. So, and the clincher was it's literally two doors down from where Sarah's mum and dad, who have also moved up to the Shire, had had put an offer on probably 3 or 4 months before us. So it was like, oh my
wow.
gosh, we could be living two doors down from Sarah's mum and dad, and that was like fantastic. And we kept that a secret from Rob and Jill until we kind of announced it. But yeah, it was one of those just again magical moments.
Okay, so I'm going to take you back a step there. I know that not everybody would be as excited to be two doors down from their in-laws. um, and can I just share with you a small story of mine? Because it's probably, and if my mum ever watches this, sorry, mum, in advance. Um, it's,
Oh
it's
dear. Oh dear.
no, no, no. It's a good sorry. In that when I was young, all I wanted to do was be away from, the constraints of my perceived constraints of family. Our family is incredibly close and in each other's pockets, and we have traditionally always spent a lot of time together. My sister would come over to my house 3, 4 times a week. And I just felt I needed to get away from that and reinvent myself. And so Vin and I moved to Australia, but now we're thoroughly ingrained here in Australia, and so it's very hard to consider moving back. But it's one of my biggest regrets. I miss having my family in my pocket, but we have a life here now 20 years later, and it's like this constant push me, pull you. My daughter's set up here. She's got a partner here. She's got a house here. She's like, I'm stuck. I've made this freaking rock and a hard place for myself. And I know that there's some reasons backed by your research that family is so important to you. So tell me a little bit about that, because if I could do my time again, Mum, this is for you. I'm so sorry. And I would do it differently.
Oh, that's heavy.
Oh,
That's
it's
heavy.
tough, isn't
But
it?
it's
Yeah.
yeah, but it's also, if you dig into that, you've also, created a life for your daughter here, which she
100%.
wouldn't she wouldn't have the partner that she would if she,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. And the
um
people we become and yada, yada. Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah.
So ours hasn't been by design, but I'm so grateful that it happened. So we moved up
Ah,
so we lived in Inverloch, South Gippsland, Victoria, for many
I
years,
didn't
and
know
we had
that.
two. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we were in Inverloch from 2007 to 2014. And Sarah, we had a chiropractic and wellness centre in Wonthaggi, and we had our first two children in Inverloch, and literally lived around the corner from Sarah's mum and dad. And then fast forward to 2014, Sarah had enough of trying to balance chiropractic and kids. We sold that practice and moved up to the Byron Shire. A year or two after that, by some form of divine intervention, Sarah's two brothers and respective families also moved to the Byron Shire. So now, Rob and Jill, Sarah's mum and dad, no longer had any of their children or grandchildren in Victoria. The only living family member left was Jill's mum, Ruth. And so when Sarah's grandmother, Ruth, passed away, Rob and Jill no longer had any direct family members. They had siblings and so on. But it was, I know some people have a don't follow your kids mentality, and Rob and Jill didn't come up necessarily to follow their children. They really came up
Yeah.
to create a greater quality of life for themselves that had
Yeah.
more purpose, more fulfillment. Again, all of our kids are at ages where they love being with their grandparents. The grandparents can provide so
Winning.
much richness. You can
Yeah.
imagine now we've got everyone's having a birthday and there's 14 or 15 there, three generations,
Oh,
cousins playing with each other, and siblings having a beer, a glass of wine. It's never just like run of the mill birthdays. It's always you're going out for pizza, whatever it is like. So it hasn't been by design, but gee whiz, I'm just so glad that it's happened. And as I said at the beginning, I come from a divorced family, and Sarah's got this nuclear family where Rob and Jill have been married for over 50 years. They've gone through plenty of hard times. Sarah's sister-in-law, my sister-in-law, but Chris, Sarah's brother, is a widow. He lost his wife Renee to cancer when she was 39, so he's a widow with two children. So there's been a fair share of challenge in the family, and I mean, just that story alone makes it so much more powerful to have everyone here in proximity where we can share the load. We can take, Albie or Grace for a night here, a night there. We can, after
Yeah,
school, Albie
how
can get the
special.
bus and stay at Nana and Pa's whilst Chris works and provides for the family. Like for us, again, I'm not telling everyone to do it. It's not what I'm
Mm,
telling the story for, but for us, it works, and I'm so glad it does because I couldn't imagine it any other way.
mm. And it echoes a lot of what you've seen in these blue zones, right? Around
Yeah,
this sort of generational family. Um,
I think maybe Industrial Revolution was the beginning of that family separation where people would start leaving the home to
mm,
travel for work and other things. And what I've recognized, I've only been to one official blue zone, which is Ikaria, a little Greek island,
mm.
where they call it the island where people forget to die. Well, the New York Times came up with that title, and I just think it's a ripper. But you go back to places where you feel like you're going back in time. I do think Ireland has a lot of this as well, where you feel like you're going back 50, 60 years.
Hmm.
And that proximity, like the emotional security that family can give, the physical and financial security that family can provide is a really healthy thing for a lot of people. I'm not going to prescribe it for everyone. It's not what
Yeah.
I'm about at all. But I just know in my experience and research, the family dynamic, when there is proximity, I do think emotional proximity being the big one. So it doesn't have to be physical, like emotion, like having strong, emotional, beautiful relationships with your parents, your siblings is the
Mm.
longest lasting relationship you will ever have in your life. I
Oh,
mean,
I would be
just think of
lost
that. And
without my sister.
yeah. But how many
Yeah.
people cannot stand their brother or sister? There's been money, or there's been he did this, she did that, whatever it is. Like sibling relationships are often the first one to die and go pear-shaped.
Is that
And
right?
it just
Hmm.
creates a level of bitterness. There's generally in adult, not so much in
Wow.
teenage, but that 18 or probably more like that 25 to 55 age, life gets busy, adults
Mm.
start having children, work pressures. So then there's distance because they don't speak as much, they don't see each other as much. And then there's emotional distance. And then a big thing happens, and that's often, a parent dying and wills and money and all the rest of it. And because they don't have that emotional proximity anymore, it can create a lot of friction, financial stress and emotional stress and so on. So, yeah, I do think that, mitigating a lot of those things in, when you're younger, and having a real value on calling your sister or your brother when it's not
Mm.
urgent, but just because you're driving and you've got
Yeah.
20 minutes up your sleeve.
Yeah.
G'day, how you going? Like, they're just actually really important.
Yeah. No, I absolutely concur. And so, um, if we head back to property then, so you've got your home now in Mullumbimby, $2 down from parents. You were able to maybe take advantage of builders grant and some incentives that were going at the time, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And so where to from here for you then with property? What's the next step? Have you thought about
Oh,
that?
it
Have you got
sounds a
some?
bit. Oh, absolutely. I'm like that impatient. I'm that impatient PPR dweller that's just
Mm,
waiting. I mean, obviously on the back of the floods and then everything that's happened from there.
yeah.
Our pool. So we've got a pool and landscaping hasn't begun, and pool is
Mm,
half done, but it's been in the ground for 6 or 7 months, and that's really because the installer, is from Lismore and has been camping under their house ever since the floods, and it's just been, you can imagine how hard it's been for someone like that
crazy.
to get back into
Yeah.
the groove of work. And then so many tradies in the area are working on insurance jobs, and you can imagine the
Mm,
backlog of that. So I'm just desperate to tie off this house so that I can um, access the equity and get investing.
Yeah.
I've had chats. I've had chats with so Carolyn Weston is my coach, and we've
Woohoo.
had all the big conversations. But it's just a matter of come on, get this done. I'd love to think that by Christmas it'll be a lot easier. Because I was having chats with Carolyn over the Christmas like 6 months ago, going, all right, what are my options? How do I do it? Thankfully being in the Byron Shire, we've got, almost instant equity. I think where a lot of people were unsure. A lot of people were unsure when we put the offer down on this land, what was happening with real estate. There
Yeah.
was some timidity, but I feel like 2 days later it went gangbusters, and everyone
Yeah.
wanted to move to Byron, and everyone was selling up their Melbourne or Sydney pads, and we've been very fortunate. The rental squeeze is sad. We were paying 650 a week in rent,
Yeah.
which went up to 800, and I just accepted it because I knew we were building. And then
Yeah.
when we left our 3-bedroom basic home in South Golden Beach, the new tenants were paying 1100 a week. Um,
No.
yeah,
So from
and people are paying
650
it
to 1100.
100. Yeah, literally that was in the space of about 8 months.
That's
Um,
nuts.
That's nuts, isn't it? And the thing is, I know there's things that like that's not legal and other things, but if you put yourself in a local position here where you would argue and fight that legality and then you just get a 30-day eviction notice and then you're back out on the open market, you weren't going to get any better value
Oh.
on the open rental market. It was, and sadly, I can tell you, so many people that have been squeezed out and they're now down, further south, or further inland just to
Yeah.
get value. I'm just so grateful to be a property owner
Yeah.
in this market because the last thing I would want to be, and I'm so grateful that Sarah's entire family are now property owners because if there's one thing that I wouldn't want to be doing in this shire over the foreseeable future, it's being at the hands of the landlord.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting topic that you raise, right? Because we're going to see this across a lot of Australia.
Yeah.
You've been privy to the conversations that we have at Positive Real Estate. You're part of the leadership team. So, we've been talking about what does the real estate market look like moving forward over the next 12, 24 months and foreseeable future. And one of the key topics is the rental squeeze.
Yeah.
And so, we are expecting that to be really the next boom, the rental boom, because there is a lack of supply. We have a lack of materials. We have a lack of people to build. And finance is potentially getting tougher. We've got, rising interest rates. When we say that, we're going back to interest rates that are more normal, if we can call it that. We've been, it's been
They're nothing compared to the 80s or the 90s, that's the thing.
no, the
It's almost like
70s.
war survivors saying, don't talk to me about, how hard it is during COVID times. We were
Yeah.
lining up for bread, not knowing if we were going to get any. And I
Mm.
feel like that a bit about interest rates, as a journalist, I'm like, can everyone stop panicking, please? Because we've got nothing on what some of our parents went through with, 18, 19, 20% on,
Yeah.
many types of loans just, 30, 40
You're,
years ago. So
how old are you?
I'm 40.
You're 40. So you've recently turned 40?
Yeah, August 2021, I was 40.
Ah, okay. So I've got a decade and nearly a half on top of you. So I
You're
actually,
looking
you
good,
talk
Tab,
about,
looking good. Yeah.
you talk about your, well, filters and all, but you talk about your parents. I remember, 13 to 15% interest rates. We didn't have the 19 to 21, I don't believe in New Zealand that you guys had here, but I was working in banking in my previous life. I've done everything in banking. I've been the teller. I've been your customer service officer. I've done time doing mortgages and lending. So, young Tab was witness to that all. And I remember my very first property, I was paying 13% interest. And then post GFC, I paid 13% again because I was a low doc borrower. And we had an opportunity to buy this awesome deal that you'll hear Sam and Jace talk about a lot in Dulwich Hill in Sydney. The only way I could get finance was to pay these when everyone else was paying about 7-8%. I had to stump up 13% to get the deal done, but I still have that property, and it's one of my best performing properties. So sometimes, as a quick side lesson, it's not always about interest rate, right? It's about the exposure and the opportunity that leverage allows you. So you got
just on your point, because the instigation for this purchase was home builder, and potentially first home buyers grant, but we ended up getting neither. And that's a story for another day. I don't, I think that it's just a bit. I just think it's a bit boring. We just our build went over, and it.
Oh right, yeah, there was a limit.
But the thing is, like, I said this to Jason, and I can tell this to you, like, $25,000. Yes, it would have been nice, and la la la. But the amount of equity that we have just in actually putting the money down to get the land and then the build, like, honestly. And it's like the interest rate story. You just do whatever you can to get in, which is exactly what you did, and you're not complaining now. Like, and it's actually what stops a lot of people, I think. They go, oh, no, interest rate's too high, I'm not doing it. I'm like, well, in 20 years' time, you'll be kicking yourself, which is what you guys talk about so beautifully, so often. And we all need to be reminded of it regularly.
I always tell the story, and I may have shared it in a previous podcast episode, but when I first arrived in Australia, my boss at the time, I was in advertising. I'd migrated from finance to advertising. So not dissimilar to journalism in a way, as far as culture goes, I think. But my boss there, he was a young fellow. He would have been probably late 20s, early 30s. And it was the start of the real estate boom in Melbourne. It was probably 96, 97. And he was looking to buy his first home. He could spend 350,000. And he was going to buy a double-fronted, double-story, double brick Victorian house in Fitzroy.
Oh my gosh.
For 350,000. Yeah, that would be worth about 4 million today. Yeah. And he turned around to me, and I remember thinking, gosh, he really knows his stuff, because I knew nothing about the Australian rent market. And he turned around to me after going to auction and saying, nah, I would have had to have stretched to my limit. And I reckon the market's going to correct and go back down to a proper price point. So I'm going to wait and time the market. I reckon 12 months, 24 months after that, it was probably worth 400, 500, 600. And then it's up from there. You do the maths on the compounding rate of return.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So I don't know if he ever, because he left and we actually moved to Sydney. So I don't know if he ever got into the market, but man, you'd kick yourself with that one, wouldn't you?
All of those things where you just, it's pretty much pull the wrong rein. My dad laughs. He had $25,000 to invest, and he was either a milk bar or a new franchise called McDonald's, and he went the milk bar. I'm like, oh, wow.
Oh, it's those crossroads, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so heading back, so I've got two things I want to touch on before we wrap up today. So life lessons for Marcus. If you could see the young Marcus, that classic podcast question, what would you be saying to the young Marcus today? What wisdom would you be imparting on young Mr. Pearce?
Well, I find this really difficult, because I have obviously listened to, I think, every one of your episodes, and I know a lot of people start earlier.
They are.
I wouldn't change anything of my adventure or my relationship with money. I think for me, it's been becoming aware of why I've been more likely to spend rather than save, and developing that muscle for saving. I think what I would probably do is just remind young Marcus of the importance of the muscle of saving. I think that's probably the thing, is when maturity struck at 21, let's say, or that 21-year-old maturity is you're still, for want of a better term, pissing money up against a wall on a Thursday night and a Saturday night with mates. And I think of all of the money, like, back in those days, might have been 80, $100 a night, and you do that 1 or 2 days a week. That's 10 grand a year. Like,
Yeah.
and back then, 10 grand would have gone very far. My dad bought a ripping two-bedder in Northcote for $110,000. I was
Mm.
with him because I was on the way to the crash repairs where my P-plate car had been totaled. And I said, Dad, go to the auction. You never know. And now I don't even want to think what it's worth. He's still got it today. And he bought it for $110,000. But he developed the muscle of saving. And I just think, yeah, younger me would just like to shake Marcus a few more times on a Thursday night and going, you don't need all those Scotch and Cokes. Just save some of that money. And yeah, because that's what I would really love. I suppose the answer is because what I would love to pass on to my children is the importance and the value and the privileges you get to experience when you save with a purpose to invest, not to hoard, with a purpose to invest. So yeah, I think that's it. But no regrets, no regrets, just reflections.
Yeah, I think the thing that struck a key with me in line with what you're saying was I watched that documentary by the Minimalists. Have you seen their stuff
Yeah, I've
around?
seen parts of it, but yeah, I'm very familiar with the doco.
Yeah, and it's just around conscious spending. It's not about not enjoying
Yeah,
yourself, not having, it's not about living for someday, which I know some people have a challenge with that as an idea, which I agree with to an extent as well. But I really love how they have a what is it, a theme around choose what you spend,
Mm,
and don't just fritter. And
mm,
I think it's that danger. Often I've found when I'm really bad with my spending habits, I'm usually unhappy about something. I'm usually not addressing something. And um, and I tend to spend as a way of rewarding myself. And some of us do it with food. I've done it with food before as well. And I
yeah,
think if you can catch those moments and rein those in a bit and replace them with better habits, it certainly helps as well.
yeah.
Mm.
And I also think that because for someone that I often found the expenses were even personal growth, as an example. Like I've spent hundreds
Mm.
of thousands of dollars on personal growth,
Yep.
but so much of it was on a credit card with money I didn't have. So
Ah,
sometimes on reflection, it would be like, you know what? Instead of going to the next like hit, talk about personal growth junkies.
yep.
Instead of going to the next hit of personal growth, why don't you go back and spend the next 6 to 12 months really applying? I mean, I got books, lifetime supply of books behind me. Why don't you go and just apply someone's life's work is in that $20 book. Do you
Yeah.
really need to go and spend $5,000 on that 3-day course when
Yeah.
you just have gone from one to the other? And again, we bounce around a bit in our 20s and 30s, and that's okay. And maybe we do that a whole life. But I do think
Yeah.
there's a bit of it. No, just delay the gratification of, oh my gosh, I'm going to this event or I'm going on that holiday. Simplify it, immerse yourself, and we say it even at positive, make
Yeah.
more, make the most of what we've got. You
Yeah.
don't always have to get something new. You can squeeze
Dog
more
it.
juice out of what you already have.
100%. And then tell me a little bit, because the stuff that you do, the Your Exceptional Life, the stuff you do around longevity, I know you've got some events coming up. You've got a 2-day event. Tell us a little bit about that, because I know there'll be a lot of people listening that'll be interested in having this as part of their repertoire.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think in the old days, pre-COVID, I would run events all the time and travel the world, taking people on longevity trips or running
Yes.
events around Australia. But I would do a 2-day event in Byron Bay called Create Your Exceptional Life, where we look at the 8 key areas of life. My
Mm.
research has led me to believe that our longevity, and in Australia we average 83 years, but statistically those last 12 are morbid, comorbidities. So we've got chronic diseases, increased meds, times in nursing homes, and the rest. So I'm very keen on helping people create more quality in their quantity of life, so that 12-year gap is dramatically shortened. And so I run a 2-day event in Byron Bay every year. I can say that now because I think we're going to have some confidence that I can run events every year again, but touch wood. So Create Your Exceptional Life is a 2-day event. It's on October 15 and 16 this year. Day 1 is your longevity, which is your purpose, your movement, and your social life.
Yep.
And then day 2 is your quality of life, which is your nutrition, your family life, your growth, your wealth. And then we wrap it up by putting your spirit, soul, and faith into all those areas. So if people are looking to do a life audit, a where are you now, a deep dive for 2 days to go, where are you now? Are you on the path to average longevity, or are you on the path to exceptional longevity? That's what that 2-day event is all about. I haven't put all the details of the event together yet because I'm still confirming it. I know it will be at the Byron Theatre. But if people are interested and they just want to register their interest, they can sign up with their email at marcuspearce.com.au. And when I've got all the details, the time, the money, and all how it all works, I'll shoot them an email.
Awesome. So that was marcuspearce.com.au, and that's Pearce, Pearce.
Thanks, Tab.
Very good. So thank you so much, Marcus. That was awesome. Thank you for sharing some of your stories and your journey with us. Adventure, because I freaking hate that word, journey.
It's an adventure. Life is an adventure.
Yeah, we have a saying in the trail community is that it's not an adventure until something goes wrong. And I love that.
Well, life's an adventure then. It's many adventures.
It just helps reframe a disaster into something exciting, which I think is maybe a nice way to finish for today. So awesome, Marcus. Thank you so much. And we'll see you around the traps.
Thanks for having me, Tab.
Hey, thanks for listening to Property Investor Tales. Remember to subscribe so you get notified every time a new episode drops. As you can guess, I love hearing people's property investor tales. So if you'd like to share yours, then please get in touch with me via email at propertyinvestortales@positivementor.com.au. We would also love your feedback, and I would appreciate a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Remember, you can watch all of these podcasts over on YouTube at Positive Mentor or at positivementor.com.au. Until then, take care, happy investing, and bye for now.